In previous lectures, we learned about circular progress dialogues. In this lecture, we are going to talk about linear progress dialogues. What we are going to do now is to change our circular progress dialog to a linear progress dialog. I stop the emulator. The first thing we are going to do is that after we initialized our dialog object, we are going to define a style for this object. So I type dialog dot set progress style. Inside the parentheses, I need to enter an integer parameter. I type progress dialog dot style underscore horizontal. This way, we define our progress dialog as linear. If you have watched the section for progress bars, you'll notice that in that section we completely covered linear progress bars. Just like progress bars, here too we have to define the mode of our progress dialog. Linear progress dialogs are defined in the two modes of indeterminate and determinate. So in the next line I type dialog dot set indeterminate. Inside the parentheses, we must pass a boolean value. I enter true, and it becomes an indeterminate linear progress dialog. Now I run the project to see the result. Alright, our application is successfully running on the emulator. As you can see, our progress dialog has now changed from circular to linear, and it has an indeterminate mode. This means that in this mode, our progress dialog doesn't have a certain value. Now I want to work with determinate mode. I stop the emulator. I change the true argument for set indeterminate to false. This way our progress bar will be displayed in determinate mode. Now I want to give an initial value and a maximum value for my progress dialog. Once I called dialog.show, I type dialog.setProgress, and I pass it an integer value. For example, I type 20. Also, I type dialog.setMax, to which I then pass 100 as the top value of my progress dialog. This means that my progress bar will be divided into 100 units, with the initial progress starting at 20 and the maximum progress ending at 100. I run the app on the emulator. Okay, our application is successfully running on emulator. As you can see, our progress dialog has a maximum value of 100. Its initial value is 20, which means a 20% progress on the progress dialog. So this way you can define initial and maximum progresses on the progress dialog. Now I want to define a timer for my progress dialog so that my progress dialog's progress increases in a certain period until it reaches the maximum. Inside the main activity class, I'm going to create an object from the handler class. I name it handler. I create a runnable object and I name it runnable, and also a timer object and I name it timer. In addition, I define an integer variable. For example, I name it I and assign it a default value of 0. Inside the onCreate method, after dialog.show, I change its initial value from 20 to 0. And after setting its maximum value, I initialize the objects that I have declared above. I type handler equals new handler. Runnable equals new runnable. You see that a run method is created automatically. I instantiate my second object, timer equals new timer. And timer.schedule. Inside the parentheses, I should pass a number of parameters. For the timer task parameter, I enter new timer task. For the delay parameter, I enter 8000. Which means that my timer task will start execution after 8 seconds. And once every 500 milliseconds, the code inside the run method will be executed. I also remove this dialog.cancel method that I have commented out. Inside the run method, I type handler.post. Then inside the parentheses, I pass my runnable object that I defined earlier. So what I did was that I defined a timer which starts scheduled execution after 8000 milliseconds, and once every 500 milliseconds the code inside the run method is executed. Inside the run method, I type I equals I plus 5. This means that once every 500 milliseconds, add 5 units to the value of I. Now I define a conditional statement on the next line. I type if I less than or equal to 100, then run the code inside this block. Otherwise, execute these else statements. If the I value is less than or equal to 100, then I type dialog.setProgress. Inside the parentheses, I type I, by which I am telling the system to set the value of my dialog's progress to I, as long as it is not more than the maximum progress. Otherwise, if the value of I is bigger than 100, then timer.cancel. Cancel my timer. And dialog.cancel. Cancel my progress dialog and I equals 0. Set the I variable to 0. Now if I run my project on an emulator, our progress dialog should start growing after 8 seconds, and once every 500 milliseconds, our progress bar must increase by 5 units until it reaches 100. Once I reached 100, the progress dialog will be cancelled. Now let's run the project on the emulator. Alright, our app is running on the emulator. I wait until my timer is scheduled and the progress increases gradually, and as expected, once it reaches the maximum value, the progress dialog is dismissed and the timer is cancelled as well. And that's it for progress dialogs. So far, we learned how to create linear and circular progress dialogs. Also, we reviewed different modes of each one. If you want to change the accent color for linear progress dialog, you can follow the same procedure we did for circular progress dialog. All you have to do is to change the value of color accent inside colors.xml. And that's the end of this lecture. In the next lecture, we will get output from our linear progress dialog project.